My name is Dr. Lee Newman, and I'd like to welcome you to the Chiropractic Associate Mastery Program, where you can learn to leverage your practice success. Here's my promise. I've helped build 17 offices with my associates and have helped hundreds of DCs as clients serve hundreds of thousands more patients. Most of these practices continue to be some of the largest fee-for-service practices in the world. If you strive to build and maintain a large practice with associates, these next 60 minutes or so can change your life. I've been involved with this topic literally since the day that I was born in February of 1963, now some 60 years ago. And so today, what we're going to work on is the Chiropractic Associate Mastery Program. I call it C.A.M.P for short, right? There's a lot of analogies there, but the letters work out as well. On today's call, I want to review with you the 8 essentials that you must learn, the 5 levels of associates, share some success stories, and define the #1 skill that we must master and continually refine and improve in order to be successful working with associates. And so this is the introduction to the C.A.M.P program. The analogy goes with mountaineering, and so basically I believe like base camp is for any chiropractor in practice. In my mind, it's from 0 to 200 visits a week or $35,000 a month. And so if you're not at those levels yet, you should be focused on building to those levels and learning the skills necessary to do so. And in fact, my base camp entry level program, I in fact call 0 to 200 in 1 year or less. And so if you really put your mind to it, I think that you can go from being a brand new doc to building to 200 visits a week, or as a new associate, adding 200 visits to a practice a week in 1 year or less. Advanced base camp is multiple doc, one office, generically seeing 300 visits a week, $1 million a year. The vast majority of my clients are 7-figure clients, and we're going to talk about the opportunity to work together. I limit my coaching capacity to 40 clients. Advanced base camp 2, right, would be multiple offices. And in multiple offices, each office and each doc in each office needs to be successful on their own, right? So again, it's base camp, 0 to 200, marketing, retention, collections, business systems, success psychology. And we work to get each piece functioning so that if you want to summit and to sell any practice or your big practice for 1 year of collections for cash, or if you want to retire in practice to where either you sell or don't sell, but pull back and only do the actions that you want to do, all of that is possible if you master working with associates. I would invite you, if you're interested, if I've tickled, scratched where you've itched, right, to schedule a C.A.M.P discovery session. You and I will sit down together, either over Zoom or over the phone, and talk about your practice, see where the business of your practice is right now, what's possible in the first 365 days, as well as in the outer years, identify the #1 obstacle that might be restricting you from successfully implementing an associate program, and then put together a 3-step plan of the exact steps that you should take next in order to break through and have success with associates. The first commitment for the rest of this call, and I know because I'm a participant in tons of calls, is to listen actively. I believe that, being able to break the golden handcuffs of success, right? Every single dollar of production should not come from your 2 wrists. And so if you can listen actively, take notes, not multitask, hold up what I'm saying compared to your real world experience and what I'm saying making sense to you, and determine how mastering this information can make a dramatic change, not only in your life, but in life of way more patients, way more staff, the community, the profession, changing the world, right? If you can do it on your own, I give you a thumbs up. I put a star on your forehead. But again, if you're looking for some help, it's really my sweet spot. Here's the permission that I would ask from you, right? Again, I've been attending seminars literally since the 70s, tons in chiropractic and even tons outside of chiropractic, right? My stuff is not the slickest presentation out there, right? I probably should have more rah than I actually do. I talk fast. I tend to deliver a great amount of information that I believe is designed to help the practicing chiropractor first to get to 200 visits a week and then to replicate their success through associates, right? I want to challenge your beliefs, right? And I will show you where to get more help if you want, right? This program, my program, is dedicated to my father. We lost him a year and a half ago now, but he was a 1959 graduate of Logan School of Chiropractic, right? Which was before I was born. He practiced for 34 years in private practice, but the vast majority of those years, except for the very last couple of years where the doc that worked with him bought the practice, he did it by himself. And so what that meant in the 70s that I remember well was, he worked 5 days a week. We took 1 week off a year to go on a family vacation. In fact, 3 nights a week, he would go back to the office after dinner for evening hours from 6 to 8. We ate dinner at 5 o'clock at night. Right? He never had a day off, and he spent 30 plus years, again, every dollar that he generated to provide for his family were out of his 2 wrists. And this concept, and I think that, right, if you're on this call, you probably understand it, I call the golden handcuffs of chiropractic success. Because, even the 1 week vacation, he shut the office so there was no revenue. It caused backward momentum. If you close for a week, what's that going to do to your volume? And he still had to pay for the vacation, right? And so that's lost momentum, and, it's no real way to practice. So just as to plant the seed, imagine that you go away for 10 to 14 days, not 60 days, but 10 to 14 days. And during the time you're away, the practice sees the most visits those 2 weeks of the whole year. And that's a possibility to kind of create. And so the C.A.M.P program is dedicated to my father. The history of associates is also interesting to review. And so typically associates were designed to have like a 1 or 2 year life shelf. And the game was to try to teach the associate as much as you could, as quick as you could, and to try to get production from the associate until the end of the contracted work period. And then they would move well outside to either a different neighborhood in your city or a different city altogether and do their own thing, right? There's other where the senior doc maintains all the control points, and basically the associates are there just to adjust spines. And so the associates just service the practice. Certainly still today, there are the drone associates. And so it's an affectionate term. Perhaps it's a bit pejorative, but it's a doc that can only excel in a limited area of actions that are only part of being a successful DC. And so he or she, might be able to adjust 150 people a week forever, but essentially never produce a new patient under any circumstance. Or they might be awesome at doing the documentation, but really, can't adjust to a level that you're comfortable with as a senior doc, or any other combination of skills that they're never going to master And so if you can get enough production out of the areas that they can produce in, right, docs have done that. Then, of course, there's the Gen X, Y, and Z associates, right? So we're 3 generations kind of from when I graduated and dealing with the personalities of these type of docs. And so it is perhaps defined as, you know, the era of employee expectation that's unrealistic. And so how do we address that and mitigate those circumstances? And so, and then, you know, there are docs, like in my father's situation, he could have had a relationship with a coverage doc, but didn't even do that. But again, you know, think about all of the coverage doc experiences that you've had in your practice. And so, you know, typically 1 or 2 people will be negatively affected enough that they actually discontinue. Another small handful won't like the adjustment. There'll also be a handful that loved it. And so, you know, I think that it's better than shutting if you don't have an associate to have a relationship with an effective fill-in doc, but there's always going to be that chafe. And so lastly, it leads to this ultimate mutual frustration where the associate doesn't feel, again, that he or she is getting to where they want to be professionally, is doing the right amount of clinical work, is learning the skills, the other skills necessary to grow a practice and to become a master chiropractor, and or for us, the associate stops striving to get to where they want to go. In fact, one of my greatest frustrations, even with docs that I successfully sold practices to. So again, as I talked about earlier, my mission, you know, I think that 200 visits a week should be a goal for all chiros. There's many reasons for that, but I think it's the warrior level of work to really have an effect in your community. And so, you know, 5 or 6 of the offices that I've sold to, the docs only want to see 115 visits a week, but they're perfectly happy doing that. And again, that leads to mutual frustration when the doc's goal doesn't really match your goal. However, right, what's really possible, I love this little colorful thumbprint, right, is to leave your thumbprint in your community with your chiropractic message, right? To be the largest single office in your big geographic area, right? The largest office in Seattle, in Boston, in whatever big city area, right? 3 docs, 700 a week, $2 million, 50% overhead. What a tight, small business model that is, that you create a real work-life balance. And so, you know, if you have a family event at 5 o'clock after school, that it's not a problem for you to attend and do what you want to do. That we affect thousands of more people over the course of our careers, right? And so, again, in the Western Pennsylvania area, you know, I have really over 20 offices that have at least a DNA fragment of my whatever philosophy and practice management design still practicing today. And, you know, it's been a large number of people in Western Pennsylvania. And in fact, the docs that we work with is another big part and a plus of my system. And so all of these docs have gone on to purchase practices, and I think all but 1 are still actively doing it and making it happen. If you can read the number of months in each of these, this was start to finish, the number of months necessary for them to buy a practice from me, right? And so if you can't, I think the smallest is 21 months and the largest is 72 months, with like an average roughly being 30 months. Right. But, you know, all of these, the relationships that you have and the lives that you change for the associates in the offices that you work in. And here's 9 of my former offices. Right. And so there's all kinds of shapes and sizes. The middle left was the main office. I think I have a separate picture. And so just to take a minute to really introduce myself, right? My name's Lee Newman. I'm a second generation chiropractor. And what that meant was really after Little League didn't quite work out the way that I had hoped that it would, and it was clear that I was not going to play baseball for a living, there was nothing else I wanted to be than to be a chiropractor. And so I knew this at age 13 and was able, through a lot of kicking and screaming with administrators, both at high school and college, to accelerate my education to where I was able to graduate from Life College, now Life University, in June of 1986 at the age of 23. And the following month, in July of 1986, opened my own office on the south side of Pittsburgh. Was able, again, I became a management client 6 months later, was able to grow one of the largest practice in Pittsburgh area, serving 20,000 visits during our big years, which is 400 a week, have best week ever, just over 500 visits, work with many associates, including a long-term employee associate who ultimately I helped to open her own practice. And, we still have a great relationship 30 years later. Work with many associates in helping them, opening offices with them as my clinic directors. And then when they built the practice, they bought it, with hundreds of clients over 25 years and helping them grow practices and work with associates. And again, I just turned 60, so my future is to work for the next several years at least with 200 plus visit a week through $35,000 a month chiros, in helping them with associates. Here's a picture of the main office. Again, 24 years there. The ending is a great story, right? So my associate, who'd been with me about 4 years at the time, and the last 2 years, he was the major treating chiropractor, seeing the majority of the visits, bought the practice from me. Next month will be 13 years in March of 2010. I consider it to be the greatest success in the sale of a chiropractic and small business, maybe anywhere, but certainly in Western Pennsylvania. 13 years later, he's still doing what he wants to do. I was fully paid. Actually, I got 80% at closing on that, but ultimately was fully paid. And the bank's fully paid. And most importantly, or equally importantly, the community maintains and has been served continuously for 37 years with the standard of chiropractic that I'm proud of, right? Again, 17 other offices, 15 sold for cash at time of closing. This was the first satellite office. It had actually been a chiropractic office that failed. The white chiropractor sign on the sign remained on the property. The red one, on the burnt one, was obviously ours. It wasn't the best layout, right? But first month we hit 100 visits a week, right? Ultimately, I ruined the relationship with that doc, but ultimately, one of my most dynamic associates took that practice over, and in a short period of time was able to build and outgrow this space, and has been $1 million practitioner for over a decade. I've been coaching since 1997, right? Again, the subluxation-based 200 visit a week model, fee for service, with focus on not only profitability, but creating generational wealth in exchange for committing a lifetime of service. And so, I believe that it is a fair exchange. And so again, as I go on and we talk, if what I'm saying makes sense to you, if you'd like to meet one-to-one, feel free to copy and paste this link. You'll probably also get an email with the link in it. We will sit down together in either Zoom or phone call session, discuss where your practice is right now, what's possible in the next year plus outer years, what your greatest obstacle is, and come up with a 3-part plan of the exact next steps that you should take to successfully implement associates. The 8 C.A.M.P Essentials, right? Having a clear vision, don't reinvent the wheel, work with the right docs, work agreements that protect you, train, delegate, don't abdicate, design to sell it for cash. And so 1 is to have a clear vision. So one of the first assignments and the first question that I'll ask you is, how does the relationship with your next associate end where you're happy? And again, there can be different answers. From my answer was when within 3 to 5 years, they buy a 200 visit a week practice from me for 1 year's worth of collections for cash, right? And essentially I was able to do that 17 times. But it could be that I don't want the relationship to end. I want them making 6 figures plus for an indefinite period of time, or for the next 25 years. Or, right, I want to work with them for, the next 2 to 3 years, and what they do then, is fine as well, but to have a clear vision. So to understand what the 4 possible outcomes on, what's in it for you, what's in it for them. And so again, my question is where they want to be in 3 to 5 years. And so to understand the basis of good relationship, as well as what their commitment is and what's possible. And so to really be able to define what size practice you want, what it looks like. And so, I would have you right now just shut your eyes, and if you could suspend belief and you could wave the magic wizard wand, in 12 months from today, how many visits could be done in your practice during that week? And so hopefully the number that you picked was at least 100 visits more than you're seeing now. But perhaps it's much, much more. And so to spend the time that we're going to spend anyhow, really focused on making it happen. And so getting everybody clear with the vision, creating mission statements, affirmations, and goals to get everybody on the same page. Number 2 is to work with the right docs. This is a critical step. This is a picture of Dr. Shannon Teroff. She was the doc that took over that first satellite practice, right? We had an instantaneous bond. She was from the area, right? So is to identify, and I have the avatar builder of 13 traits to identify who the right doc for you is. And so what school do and so for each of the traits to have a definition of what's green, what you're looking for, what would be ideal, what's yellow, it raises an eyebrow, you want to ask some more questions, and what's red, right? If we don't make it at least yellow, we can't hire this person because of this, this, and this. And so, in terms of what chiropractic school did they go to? What's green? What's yellow? What's red? And so there's 12 other traits. And so to go through and to build that avatar builder to define who the right employee is, to have a personality profile, to know that which combinations of personality profiles are most likely to be successful. If 85% of all successful associates are 2 of the 32 profiles, which isn't to say that any individual person with any profile couldn't be successful, but if 85% are successful under 2 profiles, do you want to know what those are? And so where do we find these docs, and how do we, penetrate the schools and the state boards and the chiropractic magazines and on the internet to get people to speak to? And then I think critically is my 5-part interview process to take, really an interviewee from the most basic questions of, how do they view chiropractic? What do they want to do in practice, to down to the details of, how many visits do you recommend? And have you ever asked anybody to do that, to do the proper background and reference checks? And so I have a 5-step system in place to where at the end of which, if you're going to offer somebody an opportunity to work next to you, you feel confident that they have the ability to succeed, right? Essential number 3 is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And so really, I've spent my whole life and certainly at least the last 25 years professionally, really defining this system. And, you know, if you want to have a large 7-figure single office, if you want to do multiple offices, if you want to create a real work-life balance, if you want to have an effect on the doctors that you work with, if you want to serve way more number of people, if you want to sell practices for cash, here's the good news. I've already made lots of the mistakes, right? I can short circuit that system for you. And so again, you know, my overall model is, I call this my chiropractic algebra if you've never seen it. So new patients times PVA times OVA, I call chiropractic algebra. So how many new patients you have, how often you see them, and what you collect each visit equals your total collections. And so for me, 8 new patients a week at a retention of 25 at $60 a visit to start is a $600,000 a year. This is where I want my associates to be building to, right? And so your numbers could be totally different, but again, the first 2 numbers multiplied together is weekly volume here. And so 8 times 25 is 200 a week. And so what would 200 a week collect in your practice? And so again, if you could do that in a year or less, and if the associate did collect $600,000, or if the associate worked, you know, hard, like they should, and the practice grew by $600,000, you know, how much more profit is it? And what should the associate make? And so I think the associate in this case should make $150,000, right? And so it's focused on producing these 3 numbers. How do you get 8 new patients a week? How do you build a retention of 25? How do you collect $60 a visit, or whatever your numbers are, right? This is Dr. Dan. Dan's wife was from Western Pennsylvania. He was in Virginia. He came in, worked next to me. We opened a practice. He actually took over this practice from a doc that failed with me. And so you should know not every associate that I work with succeeded. So, but he took over this practice, and in an 18-month period of time was able to purchase the practice. And, you know, they went on, built a family, lived happily ever after. And I think that he sold the practice successfully, and they moved back down south, but that was after, you know, over a decade of being in it. Essential number 4, work agreements that protect you. And so this is important, right? We're the asset. We're the one with assets. It's our system. They're our employees. I know that there are chiropractors out there that still have a handshake agreement with their associates, right? What we want to do is to define all the rules when we're friendly and in good relationship, and define what happens if we should never not be. We want to protect what, you know, you're going to learn. One of my rules is to always protect the mothership. And so the work agreement needs to protect the practice and us. And so having the right work agreement, you understanding each of the pieces of the work agreement, making sure that it's as strong as possible in your state, that if you can still have non-competes, that you have non-competes with stiff penalties, and so that we protect the practice. Essential number 5 is to train your employees all the time. Train, train, train. They estimate that in corporate America, a full 30% of time of any new executive is spent in training. But oftentimes, for all employees in a chiropractic practice, including associates, we just throw them on the firing line and like, here you go, here's a patient, take care of them. Or perhaps we give some rudimentary education, but I want it to be in detail. And again, I think it's the number one reason for mutual failure is lack of a proper training program. And training should be from before day 1. So after my interview process, and they sign the work agreement, now they're officially an employee, I would give them the first homework assignment to show up on day 1. And mine is my pre-consultation script. So it's the first script. And so when they show up on day one, after I kind of welcome them, I'll take them back and I want to hear it. And so this will tell me like how serious they took the assignment. Are they coachable? Can they do a script? And are they on board? And it's the first indication. They can get a big win right off the bat. Excellent job. That's the type of effort that I want to see. Here's a couple of ways to improve that. But like, I like the attitude that you came in on. And so you can get a big win right off the bat. But if that doesn't happen, and how to handle that. Essential number 6 is to delegate, not abdicate. And so again, I strongly recommend reading the E-Myth Revisited by Gerber. He points out that any small business person, including us, are really a three-headed beast. We're an entrepreneur, right? Looking to get a return on our investment. We're a producer, and in our case, that's being the docs that we all, why we dedicated our lives, actually taking care of people. And 3, we're managers. And I will point out that it's this third role that we often function the weakest in. So it's able to become a strong manager so that we can motivate, train, and then inspect. We have meaningful meetings on a daily, weekly, and monthly and quarterly basis. We get timely reports, daily, weekly, monthly, of the stats, of the notes, of things that happened, of new supplies that you need, of having a system for everything. That we have a scorecard of the numbers, that we have kind of a social presence in the practice of how we want it to be. We like living every day in practice. I'm a big believer in having a daily stand-up meeting. I affectionately call it the powwow. This is still my current agenda, right? I think that it's also important to be able to declare victory. And so, I asked you 12 months from now, how many visits a week could your practice be seeing? And so to know, for me, I guess the number was always 500. It was aspirational. I would also point out, I never really reset it mentally in my head. And so I never got to 700. But, if you wanted your practice to do 400 visits a week at $80 a visit, right? So it's 20,000 visits. It's $1.6 million a year with 2 associates, with 3 CAs on a 50% overhead. And I'd like to do that for the foreseeable future. Let's define it as the next 10 years, right? I give you a thumbs up. I think that's righteous. And so being able to declare victory. However, you could also, essential number 7 is satellite offices. And so when I go into this realm, I like to lead off by saying the only docs that should consider multiple offices are the ones that have a red hot burning desire. I missed a couple slides here. So here's declaring victory. Right? I guess just to redefine that, right? It not only practice success. So one other piece of my curriculum is financial mastery. And so, really taking all of the profit of whatever level that you're at now and in the future, and to know that you're being a good steward of the money. That you pay all of your overhead, both in the office and personally to live off of. B, that you've set aside the proper amount for taxes so that you don't ever get caught with a big tax bill in any April of any year. And that C, that you put a defined amount of money away for your long-term growth so that after 20 years in practice, you could have a $5 million goal or more of net worth. And so it's another core piece of my curriculum. Essential number 7 is satellite offices, right? And so for those of you that have the calling, when is it safe to open the satellite? Lease negotiations, both for the satellite and the main office. How do you open an office with no out-of-pocket money? How fast can that office be operationally profitable? How do you manage remotely? What are the interim goals? What are the final goals, right? And so I would ask, I've been asked this, why not just maintain ownership of multiple offices? I think there's many reasons not to. The biggest one being the docs that can do it want to own it. And so it can line up everybody's interests, which is an underlying golden rule of mine. Everyone's interest should line up. Essential number 8, when it becomes time to do so, is sell satellite offices for cash, right? Again, I understand why you even sell. And if you're selling the main office, how do you maximize that? How do you find the money? What's the least amount of actual money you should take at closing? How do you do it in the most tax efficient manner? And to understand if you need to become a lender, if you need to finance any part of the deal, or if you decide to finance a larger part of the deal, which I typically do not recommend, to understand that fully. And so all of the issues of finding the money and actually making the transaction. And so again, going through the essentials, if you'd like to have a one-to-one talk, I'd like you to schedule a C.A.M.P discovery session. We'll take a 15-minute call to see if we're a good fit. We'll define where your practice is, what's possible, what any obstacles might be, and to come up with a 3-step plan to actually move you to success with associates. The next topic is the 5 levels of associates that I've identified. And so level 0 would be an intern or no licensed doc. They might still be in school. It's a glorified new patient assistant. You know, what you need to obtain is what can they legally do in your state. And so whatever that is, I'd have them doing. If they can do exams, if they can do x-rays, if they can even adjust people, if you're there, I would build all that in. If they can't, then what can they do that can still service the practice? When they get a license, right, they're now a level 1. And so their job is to learn the training, to grow their own practice or the bigger practice, and to be our new patient assistant. And so if you didn't have to do the exam or x-rays on new patients, how many more new patients could you schedule per week? And so this is step 1. You know, I think that a new associate within a 2-week period of time should be able to perform an exam and x-rays to an acceptable standard, which frees us up to be able to schedule new patients every half hour. And so, you know, if you schedule just 1 more a week, it would be an automatic win, right? So they need to do all of our new patient activities, plus generate their own new patients, doing all their day 1s and day 2s, making sure that all of their paperwork is correct, and again, being our new patient assistant. When they achieve 100 visits a week, right, then they get to be level 2. And I call this bonus after 3 consecutive months, but that ends up lining up. It's generically 100 visits a week, and they're no longer your new patient assistant. And it's at this point where we can hire the next associate, right? And so we want to manage and motivate them through continued training, daily interaction, organized meetings, and building the appropriate relationship. When they reach over 150 visits a week or 600 visits a month, the old number was 25,000, maybe it's 30,000 now, right? That's a senior level doc. I want to provide them whatever assistance they need. Money for marketing, staff people, new computer, new piece of equipment, continuing education, whatever it is that they might need, and to push them to the 200 visit a week mark, where either at that point they get their own office or they get designated as a clinic director, right? And so I actually do a second contract at this point. And if you're moving them into their own office, there becomes the transitional challenge of how does that office get profitable as quickly as possible. And so we address all of that and to make that ramp up faster. And so I would ask you right now, you know, what you've liked so far of what you've heard. I like this image of mountaineering and summiting, right? It's certainly, you know, there's some assembly acquired when it comes to associate mastery. But again, if you've liked what I've talked about, if you'd like to schedule a one-to-one, copy and paste the link, pick a time that's good for you. We'll discuss your practice, what's possible, any obstacles, and build a plan for your growth, right? Here's the last major piece, which is the one skill that we must master. And that skill that we must master is getting production from others, right? And so having that in mind, that every single dollar doesn't depend on your two wrists, right? And so that we can get another licensed doc, and that really expands our capacity. So we need to get production of others. We need to learn how to do it. It's not a natural skill for us. So becoming a stronger manager, becoming A, work with the right docs, and B, become a stronger manager. It's not easy breezy, but it's worth the hard work. And I might argue what the alternative is. And so what's in it for you is we get to break the golden handcuffs of success. We get to leverage our biggest personal success, or at least in business, our ability to succeed in practice. We can convert risk into reward, and we can convert ordinary income to capital gains, which is tax efficient. We can surface way more people. And if you're, at the age of exiting, we can create a golden parachute. So again, I'd ask you that if I've itched where you scratched today, schedule a discovery session. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I do have a bunch of free resources. I have a Facebook group. You can email me at drleenewman@gmail.com. And I look forward to speaking to you